Okay, I'm good to go.
Okay, cool. Are you going to play the music or not play the music?
I'll add the music afterwards.
Okay. Tell me when we are. Just count down or something like that. Just start the show.
All right. We are the New York Knicks. I'm back, New York.
Okay. We are.
We are the New York Knicks. I'm back. Back in New York. Well, it's the Knicks. New York. We are the New York Knicks. New York. For this new season we're about to enter, the Knicks is taking no shorts just like winter. New York, New York.
New York be about the Knicks, huh?
But the best thing about New York City is K-N-I-C-K-S.
Everybody say go New York, go New York, go!
You said the intro music gets you pumped and ready to go.
Yeah, I guess we go. Are we recording now? Okay. So
yeah, we're going.
We're good. Okay. So we are the New York Knicks podcast episode. I don't know.
New York girl.
Jay is out this week. He's in Thailand in prison or having sex with youngins. I don't know. So we are here with Chris. He is the head of our network, the Almighty Ballin network. And Chris, tell us about the. Do any intros you want to do.
I'm Chris Axmann. I was the founder of almightyballer.com, Almighty Baller Radio. Check it out. If you're a Knicks fan and thinking about jumping ship, maybe to the Brooklyn Nets, check out the Glue Guys. It's our net show. Or, if you like... right. Well, I mean, none of them are as good as this show, right?
Okay. And anyway, so we meant to record...
Yeah. At Almighty Ballin.
At Almighty Ballin. We meant to record last Tuesday on draft lottery night. We were going to give our reactions right when the draft lottery happened. We were going to record with Chris, but we did not do a show. But we're going to do a show now and talk about everything that happened.
Yes.
So let me ask you, Chris.
Rigged.
Is there anything more goddamn rigged than I mean, how much more rigged can it be than the NBA draft? If the NBA draft announced it was colluding with Russia, it'd be less rigged.
Dig, if you will, this picture. It's NBA HQ. Adam Silver is sitting there, and he's on the phone. NBA owners are calling him. They're like, hey, I have this great guy, Giannis, and even though, he's really good, we just got swept. And then Masai Ujiri calls, and it's like, yo, we were one of the best teams in the East, but we just got swept by the freaking Cavaliers. Like, what are we going to do? So he's fielding all these calls, and he thinks to himself, wait a minute. If Boston gets the number 1 pick and they get Markelle Fultz, then they'll be a real contender. So maybe, just maybe, they should get that pick. And wait a minute, the Los Angeles Lakers aren't making as much revenue as they typically do, even though they're an international brand. And there's this LeVar Ball guy. We got to make sure that he's in the biggest media center in the United States. Wait a minute. Lonzo Ball's got to go to the number 2 spot. So rigged.
And Philly, because we took their GM away, we have to keep giving them number 1s to prove that we're smarter than Hinkie was.
Well, so what I think, and you guys have been the beneficiary of this, I think it's not entirely unreasonable to think that for the most part, it is random. I just think that the NBA probably, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right?
Wait, hang on. You think for the most part it's been random? There's 3 out of 4 seasons, Cleveland gets the number 1 pick. LeBron leaves, they get the number 1 pick. Then the following year, they get the number 1 pick. Then LeBron agrees to return to Cleveland, so they get the number 1 pick again.
Yeah, and Chicago gets the number 1 pick when Derrick Rose is coming out. That's the circumstances where it's not random. I think that when the NBA feels like there's a big amount of money to lose, that's when they probably step in and tweak things. Now, I'm not positive of that, but it seems to make sense to me.
It seems really, really amazing coincidence that everything that the NBA kind of would want to happen in the draft seems to happen over and over again. It's like they're like, oh, it'd be great if Boston and the Lakers got the first 2 picks. I hope that could happen somehow. Company we're paying to audit this.
Patrick Ewing, right? Like you guys were the beneficiary of that recently.
Yeah, but since Patrick Ewing was drafted, the Knicks have only moved down the lottery. They've been, they had the good 90s, but they've been terrible since basically. And the Knicks have only either stayed where they are in the lottery or move down. They have not benefited from the lottery since Patrick Ewing was drafted.
Well, I mean, maybe that just means that Adam Silver's trying to get James Dolan fired, which is,
No,
not a bad choice.
Here's what it is.
Oh, wait, no, get him to step away, sell the Knicks. I don't know, whatever.
The Knicks have been a goddamn complete embarrassment to the NBA the last 15 years. You'd agree, right?
I think the Knicks are, yeah.
Okay, just agree.
Yes, I agree.
They've been a goddamn embarrassment, and they are the most valuable team in the NBA. What does the NBA even give a shit? The Knicks could do anything. The Knicks could get each game. They could all be like, okay, instead of playing basketball, we're gonna reenact Swan Lake every night, and the Knicks would still be the most valuable franchise in all of the NBA.
Yeah.
The fans have to stop going to the games. That's the only way we're getting the number one pick.
Wasn't that sort of happening recently? Wasn't there like a boycott?
It doesn't matter. I don't know what it is, but they're still the most valuable franchise. At any moment, James Dolan could be like, "Oh, I'm bored. I'll just trade this team for $2-3 billion."
A solid platinum kazoo.
Yeah. So I have a name for you. I got a name for you.
Go ahead.
I got Michael Porter.
Yeah, that's next year, right?
Yes, he is considered the best prospect, wing prospect since Kevin Durant, according to Draft Express. And our entire season next year, as a Knicks fan, will be focusing on trying to get him because there's nothing else to focus on. Basically,
unless you get Jason Tatum this year, in which case you already have the bad version of Porter, so like why get the good version?
Well, no, because the only way we're getting Jason Tatum is if he gets injured prior to the draft and falls. Like something horrible has to come out. Like they're like, oh, Jason Tatum, he's under investigation for child pornography. Then he'll fall to the Knicks.
I don't know, man. It's a Duke player. Duke players fall.
That would be great. So here's what's going on here. The Knicks are going to trade Melo. The Knicks' winning percentage without Melo is. It's like 12. It's like the Knicks win about 12% of the games that Melo does not play. There's some low percentage around there. The Knicks are going to be horrible next season. Plus, Phil Jackson is going all in on the triangle next year. He's been the GM of this team for this is the 4th year, and now he's finally going all in on the triangle. I cannot fathom that he's been here for 3 years and finally is like, okay, now we're going to go all in on my vision.
See, it's funny. The only good coach at running a modern triangle, because the problem isn't the triangle. The problem is that it's not modernized. Like that Chicago Bulls team with Joakim Noah and Derrick Rose, that they ran basically the triangle. Thibodeau basically ran the triangle. And so you can make something like that work if you have A, the talent, and B, the coach. And C, you modernize it. But the problem is that Phil Jackson doesn't want to do that.
Right. Well, I feel like the big problem has been he's trying to Phil Jackson wants to be the team's coach. He does not want to be the team's GM, despite the $12 million a year he's getting to be the team's GM/president. And basically, he's been trying to coach by proxy, but kind of like this hands off, but like undermining his coach at any good time to just screw. It creates an environment like. No one really takes the coach seriously. And the only guy, if Phil really wants a vision, he's got to implement it himself. He can't implement a vision like this by proxy.
Yeah. The only guy who's done it well is Derek Fisher, and he had to go and bone Matt Barnes' ex-wife. So
we don't know. We don't even know why he was fired. I mean, that's like everyone assumes that was getting out of control, and that's why he was fired. But maybe he was just fired because Phil just didn't like the fact that he was going away from the triangle.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's also a possibility. I just feel like, they were doing really well for the first half of the season. There's a point at which you're doing well enough that if Phil Jackson fires you, it's just like, it just doesn't look good, you know?
Well, they were 23-23 or 22-22, and then they had a 10-game losing streak where they kind of fell apart. It was Melo got a freak injury, missed the game,
right.
And the Knicks fell apart. And Phil just jumped in immediately and fired Derek Fisher, which he probably wanted to fire Derek Fisher 20 games ago, but he needed a losing streak to fire him.
Right, yeah.
Because you can't fire
you just need a coach who's so good that Phil Jackson can't fire him, even though that coach is not running the triangle.
Or you just need a GM who knows what they're doing. I mean, you need a GM who has experience in this. The Knicks, in the last 2 decades, have had one experienced GM. The only experienced GM they had was Donnie Walsh. Everyone else was kind of lacking for experience when they took the job.
But the triangle, man. Count the rings.
Triangle. Yeah, the triangle. Yeah, he's got the rings. I mean, you know what? He's really a good coach, so I assume he can be a GM. It makes sense. And
no, it doesn't. It's
doesn't
like
at all.
it's two different jobs. It's like saying, well, this guy was a really good nurse, so he can probably run a hospital.
Mitch Hedberg, the comedian, had a great. I don't know if you heard Mitch Hedberg before.
Yeah.
He's the king of one-liners, and he had a thing about how people kept saying "Oh, you can do stand-up. Can you act?" And he'd be like, "Oh, that's kind of like, oh, you're a chef. You're a really good cook. Can you farm?"
Right.
It's totally different skill set.
It doesn't. Yeah, exactly. Being a good GM, so much of it is just being on your grind. It's showing up to the practices and the games and, doing your research and flying to Greece and finding Giannis Antetokounmpo and taking that seriously and, having Excel charts full of stats and being a dork like Daryl Morey, or not having a life, sort of sell your soul to being a GM because you just have to have tons of information and you need to process it. And Phil Jackson is too busy or too uninclined or whatever his deal is. He's not going to the games. And when he finally does, he trumpets it hey, look at me, I'm at this game. And it just becomes, a whole parade. And it just draws attention to me anyways, to the fact that it's well, if you did this every time you went to a game, then clearly you're not going to a lot of games because you only do this once a year,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Pat Riley was the example of the perfect example of a guy who was a coach who made it work. And I guess Dolan was well, Phil has even more rings than Pat Riley. This should be even better.
Yeah, but Pat Riley also delegates really well, though. And Phil Jackson doesn't. And
at one point, Pat Riley didn't like how the coaching was going. That when Shaq and Wade were there, he didn't like how the coaching was going. So he was he's forget it. I'm just going to take over. I'm going to coach. Phil doesn't like how the coaching's going, but won't take over, but but still has to go coach by proxy and still won't do the GM part of the job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say.
He should be scouting everywhere. So we'll go back to the draft.
Well, so one, he should be collecting information, and two, a good GM needs to be able to process it and make decisions based on this vast amount of information that it takes tons of time to collect. But his acid-riddled mind doesn't even process information well, so it's he doesn't have the information, and what information he does have is not good.
Well, I don't know how well he processes the information. I know he doesn't outwardly make good decisions. His good decisions he's made. He's been very good in the draft so far, but other than that, everything else has been just not very good. Everything's been just a dumpster fire beyond that. I talked about on a previous show that in some ways he's worked out as the perfect GM because we wouldn't have had all these high draft picks if not for the fact that he's such a disaster at his job.
Yeah.
So the rebuild we wanted was kind of forced upon us because Phil has it would be hard to have been worse with as a GM than Phil has been.
But he picked Kristaps, so.
He picked Kristaps, and he picks Hernan Gomez, who looks pretty good. And you're hoping that he nails this 8th pick. Only the Knicks also could fall in the draft. We win that last game against Philly for no good reason, and now we lost the coin flip, and now we're the 8th pick, and the 7th pick is going to the Hall of Fame, guaranteed. There's no doubt in my mind the 7th pick in this draft will be the combination. It'll be basically who is the greatest player ever and ever. They'll be some people will say Michael Jordan, some people will say LeBron James, and the other people will say the 7th pick in the draft. That will be how the conversation will go for the future. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Whoever goes there, it's just going to be un-effing believable.
Unless someone picks Jahlil Okafor first, maybe being knocked down, he's going to get saved from himself. Who's picking at number 7?
So yeah, I have the order. The order, I think it's 7 is Minnesota.
Okay. Well, so yeah, maybe. That's great. If Jonathan Isaac slides, I think Jonathan Isaac should probably go to the Timberwolves. But if Thibodeau is well, we already have Gorgui Dieng, and we need to definitely run a too big system, and he picks I don't know, Jaren Fox, or what would be really funny is if he picked Lauri Markkanen. That would be classic Tibbs. But then Jonathan Isaac would slide to the Knicks, and Jonathan Isaac next to Porzingis would actually be incredible.
So here's the thing. There are a couple guys that they seem like, I don't know if Isaac's going to fall, and it seems unlikely he's going to fall, but maybe he does. And you never know what's going to happen. It seems like everyone's talking about 3 guys being the guys that are most likely the Knicks are going to take, or 3 or 4 guys. There's like the French dude, Frank
Tilikina.
Whatever his name is. I know the Knicks are going to take him because I can't pronounce his last name, so he should just be a Knick.
Porzingis.
Is it Ntilikina? What is it?
Yes, it's Tilikina. It's
Okay,
the N is
so
silent.
Frenchie. So it's either going to be Frenchie. It's going to be people talk about Malik Monk, but then there's like some rumors that he'll go a little higher. Dennis Smith. Am I leaving anyone else? Who's the other one they're associating with the Knicks?
The guys I have slated to potentially go to the Knicks are Dennis Smith, Frank Tilikina, Malik Monk, De'Aaron Fox, Jason Tatum, and Jonathan Isaac.
So I'm thinking a couple of those guys. So I think it's going to be between Monk, Ntilikina, and Dennis Smith. And of those 3 guys, and not that I have scouted these guys, and I've just read Draft Express, so I really have no clue who's actually really good. But I'm going with Ntilikina as being the guy who I feel like the Knicks should probably even. He's got the funky last name. He's got the Euro thing going, and I feel like he has the biggest upside of all the players. Plus, he's supposed to be a hell of a defender.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if he has the highest upside. In fact, I'd probably say that.
Of the 3 guys I mentioned, just of the 3 guys I mentioned, I'm not including Tatum or Isaac.
Well, okay, so I have Tilikina highest out of every guy that you listed except for Malik Monk. Oh, and Jonathan Isaac I have higher. I don't like Jason Tatum, don't like De'Aaron Fox, don't like Dennis Smith. So I think Tilikina is great.
Well, let's go through why don't you like these guys? Why don't you like Tatum? I'm surprised you don't like him.
Tatum strikes me as, so I think that the worst thing, a real flop in the draft isn't picking Johnny Flynn. The real problem is when you go out and pick Rudy Gay, or at least the player who people think Rudy Gay is, or DeMar DeRozan, or Jonas Valanciunas, the guys who stick around and pretend that they're good, and franchises will decide they're good, but more importantly, fans will decide they're good, but they're actually not, because once you hitch yourself to that wagon, your team is not going to succeed, right? And I think Jason Tatum is probably just going to end up being basically at his peak, he'll be what Melo is right now. Or last year, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. It's so hard to know. The Malik Monk is the guy that makes me think he'll be the Melo. Everyone described him as a guy that is a offensive firepower. He's going to be great on offense, but it seems like his defense and work on defense is questionable. That's from what I've heard.
Well, so the thing about Malik Monk is that he scores about 1.4 points per possession off the dribble, which is a good amount better than Steph Curry did in college.
No, yeah, everyone says he's really good.
Oh,
yeah.
wait, no, it's 1.1 off the dribble and then 1.4 catch and shoot. So if that's real, then he's pretty much by far the best player in this draft. He's a top 3 shooter in the NBA for a very long time. He's basically like a more athletic Steph Curry, basically, right?
Who wants that? That means so you mean he's going 7th?
Yeah, basically. But I don't know if that's real. There's random luck. Sometimes people have good shooting seasons.
Yeah, it's hard also that you have one season. It's just their freshman season because everyone's a freshman. So everyone's played 1 year in college. And some guys, some of the stats are against some pretty crappy teams they play. And I don't know. It's 1 year in college. It's really hard to figure out how good the guy is going to really be.
Yeah, but that play style, so it's at the top is Steph, and then, if his shooting numbers are a little bit worse, then he's Damian Lillard. If they're a little bit worse than that, then he's Dennis Schroeder. And if it's a little bit worse than that, he's Lou Williams. And if he's worse than that, then he's who's that guy? Tony Roten.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
The guy the Knicks finally, after the entire season was over, they're like, we're going to make a move. We're going to add someone to the roster, Tony Roten, and we will cut him before he even comes to the building.
Yeah.
By the way, what I find amazing about Phil is that every other team is 10-day contract. Let me try someone out from the D-League. Let me see if I can find someone who's really good, maybe that wasn't drafted. Phil doesn't do this. The Knicks have had a goddamn awful roster for the last 3 years. Last 3 years, they've been a garbage team, and Phil cannot find himself to go, let's try some 10-day contracts out. Let's see if we can find someone who's good. San Antonio Spurs right now, because Kawhi Leonard is injured, one of their star players is Jonathan Simmons, who was not drafted, who they got out of the D-League.
But that roster spot, that 15th man, has to be Sasha.
Yes, I understand. Sasha, for whatever reason, is... Yeah, I don't understand what Phil thinks is going to happen with Sasha. Like, Sasha's going to... Oh, well, I think in a couple years, when Sasha's 40, he'll be really good.
Yeah, I'm sensing a breakthrough for him.
I don't understand. It's just the logic in the roster. And we have some guys that he's found. He's found Ron Baker, who's undrafted, and this guy, Jason Randall, could be decent, but like other teams also look outside of. Yeah, I mean, other teams look outside their own. Other teams are like, there's more than one team in the D League, and we can sign guys off of any team. And the Knicks are like, only guys from Westchester, because those guys are learning the triangle, so I can only get those guys. And I just feel like with this kind of roster and how the season was a disaster by January, you would have been like, let's just find some young guys, try them out, and see if we can get another Jeremy Lin. So let's see if we can just catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, good organizations do that.
Right. Not the Knicks.
Well, Sasha.
So Monk worries me because defense. He's not supposed to be a great defender, and I feel like the Knicks need to work. I know Phil Jackson thinks if we run the perfect triangle, we won't even have to run back in defense. But defense has been their biggest disaster. Their offense hasn't been all that bad. It's the defense that has been just a disaster. And I want guys I want to build the 90s Knicks again.
Well, so if that's what you want to do, then Jonathan Isaac, or actually probably Jaren Fox is the guy you want.
Yeah, well, Fox is not going to be down. Fox is not going to drop. Fox people are having, he's potentially a top 3 pick.
Yeah, he might drop,
He would drop if the Knicks knew how to draft.
He's a point guard who like can't shoot and doesn't project to ever be able to shoot.
The projections on who can shoot, though, is a little bit of BS because there are guys that come in the league who cannot shoot and end up becoming really good shooters. One of them plays center for the Golden State Warriors.
Okay. Let me ask you something, right? So, do you think that light years ahead that was a coincidence that they found Draymond and Draymond developed a jump shot? And a better question is, do you think that the Spurs knew something about Kawhi Leonard that everyone else didn't?
Yeah, I think they had a hunch that this guy would be really good, and they had some scouting and said these guys would be really good. But it wasn't like they other teams could have drafted these guys also. It wasn't like I guess what I'm saying is that there's just because they had a feeling about these guys, there are other guys they had a feeling about that they never got a chance to draft.
So I think that shooting is like a sexually transmitted disease, right? Sometimes
you mean if I go cheat on my wife, I'll become a better shooter?
Shoot your shot, man. So
I did get shot.
It's like most people. It's like if you have herpes, right? You can like treat something like that, but it's always going to come back, right? It's going to be like recurring, right?
Yeah.
And some people have syphilis, which is a lot worse. But once you cure it, it's cured. But like sometimes you have really bad stuff and it's incurable. So what you want is the guy with syphilis because you can just cure it and it's never going to come back. And there are guys whose jump shots look worse and are worse who you can project to be able to fix. One of those guys, I think, is probably going to end up being Josh Jackson, who I have number 2. He has a worse jump shot than a lot of people. He's a pretty bad jump shot. But I have reasons to think that his jump shot can be fixed in a way that Jaren Fox probably can't. And so that's my thing. Coming into
the league, to name one of the greatest ever, LeBron wasn't considered an amazing shooter coming into the league. And the way he's become such a better shooter is because he does something really smart. He takes high percentage shots, a lot more of them. He focuses a lot more on those. And if you look at a guy in college who say is taking a lot of stupid shots, you could probably improve their shooting percentage by just getting them to take smarter shots if they're coachable.
Well, so here's an interesting thing about LeBron. Yeah. This is sort of an example of what we're talking about. LeBron would make shots harder for himself in high school because he was just so much better that it would get boring, right? So he basically developed this hitch in his jump shot where you can still see it when he's having a slumpy type of night and he doesn't really care. He fades away for no reason when he's shooting a 3 instead of just lining up and doing his shooting motion, which is perfect. So that's when he starts sort of front rimming shots, is when he isn't thinking about it and he slips into that bad habit. So That's the type of thing that it's like, well, this is a guy who all he cares about is basketball. Let's go ahead and assume that he's going to figure it out and be able to shoot threes once he gets to Miami, once he gets like a little bit further in his career. That's like an example of something that's curable in a way that like Omer Osik's jump shot is not.
Or you could look at Melo, and Melo, the biggest one that knocks on him is that he takes a lot of tough shots, and he's a low percentage. Like he's he always scores a lot, but his shooting percentage is not where you want it to be. It's very rare in his career has a shooting percentage where you're like, oh, I'm glad Melo shoots that percentage. You want him to be like 48%, 49%, and he's usually 43%. And it does hurt his team a lot. And part of the reason is Melo has so much talent, but it's hard to coach. It's hard to get through to him, and he just doesn't. You have to figure out. You might think a guy has syphilis, and it could turn out he has Melo-AIDS.
Melo-AIDS sounds like
yeah,
a cough drop or something. Like
it
Rolaids.
does sound like you know that AIDS originally it was the name of a weight loss supplement. Tell me you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there was a South Park thing joking about that.
Yeah, it used to be, and it was like lose weight with AIDS, and it came out to be true.
So yeah, Melo's problem is that Melo's really good in international play because there's a shorter 3-point line. So you could assume that if the shots that he was practicing were 3 or 4 steps back, that he would be really, really good. He just doesn't have the self-awareness. And also it's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. He's already decided that he wants to make his money in the mid-range. And so it's like, well, boom, done. Can't have that. You can build the best possible team around this guy, and you're still, at the end of the day, just going to be the Toronto Raptors. That's best case scenario. Worst case is the Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, and really, at the end of the day, with all this, the draft is such a crapshoot. Every year, we talk about this stuff and who's going to be great, and then you look back on it, you look at the top 10 picks, it's rare that you look at the top 10 in the draft, it's rare that you have 2 All-Stars out of that top 10, much less 3 or 4. Like, these 10 guys are going to draft, 1 or 2 of those guys will probably go to an All-Star game, max, in their career.
Yeah, it would be interesting, though, if you every year had the Spurs picking like number 2 or something, despite being really good. Because I think a lot of it is you have to go to the right system to end up being a superstar. Like you have to have the right development. You have to I don't think it's so much about culture. It's just like about if you're put in a position to succeed, then you can do it. That's one of the things, I think Mike Malone in Denver has done a lot of things wrong, but at least he just finally was like, okay, let's run the offense through Jokic, because most coaches wouldn't have done that. So now he's going to be an all-star, but if he had been playing with, say, Mark Jackson, he would have just been like benched. Or Draymond Green is a good example of that too, because he was benched for like David Lee. So that's part of it, I think, is opportunity.
It's also,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a socialist system, a spread the wealth system where we're trying to like make the bad teams better. And so inherently, the top 10 best player in the draft go to the top 10 biggest disasters in the NBA.
Yeah. And like, mark my words, Mario Hezonja, that guy on the Orlando Magic. I
want the Knicks to get him.
He's going to end up on the Spurs and score 20 points a game off the bench like Manu Ginobili.
I think the Knicks should be going for high upside players, and a guy like Hernan, Hernan got whatever the hell his name is. Orlando's going to cut bait with him and give up, and the guy's got a lot of talent, and someone else is going to find that talent. It's probably going to be the Spurs. You're probably right. But yeah, I agree with that. So the Celtics, they have the number 1 pick in the draft. Do you remember when's the last time a team as good as the Celtics had this high of a pick?
Maybe never. I don't know.
Because no one seems to be talking about this. The Pistons.
Oh,
In one of the greatest drafts ever, the Pistons had the number 2 pick in that draft. 4 of the 5 guys that went in the top 5 are likely going to be in the Hall of Fame. The Pistons took the one guy who barely played in the NBA.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. The Pistons, they won the title the year before. They had the top pick. You couldn't be better situated than the Pistons and the top pick. And they just shit the bed in one of the best drafts ever. Man, that's one of my favorite what ifs is like Melo on Detroit. Yeah. Pistons. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that would have been a very. They did not have Rasheed Wallace yet. They probably would not have gotten Rasheed Wallace. But they probably would have been. That would have been a very interesting organization to ever added. And Billups would have been a teammate of Melo right from the start.
And maybe, Tayshaun Prince, when you look at his body, he sort of is like a power forward anyways. They could have been like, I like it.
They would have had a very interesting career. Like, he would have had a much different... Yes, I agree. I think Melo would have had a much different career if he had gone to Detroit.
Yeah.
Because right away he's also forced into a system. They already had a very good system in place. He's forced into a system where you'd have to really listen to his coaches, because he's on a team that's that good. You have to respect your coaches and have to kind of follow their coaching, or else you won't play.
Yeah, and also, do you know this thing where James Harden often guards power forwards? Because if you go like back to the basket on a guy like James Harden, he is pretty good at that. Do you know this thing? Like, he guards Zach Randolph when they play the Grizzlies. So my theory is that if a guy's like backing you down in a way that you wouldn't if you're guarding like a perimeter player or chasing around JJ Redick, you can't just like not try, because you'll get embarrassed. You have to just like pay attention and just like do it, right? And I think that the Spurs actually really abused him and like wore him out by just posting up Pau Gasol on him over and over. And it's really exhausting. And that's why he doesn't play defense, is because it's super exhausting for him, but he can do it, right?
Right.
So I think that is sort of like the situation that Melo would have been in, where if he was at the 4, people like Rasheed Wallace would have been trying to post him up. And Melo's like one of the strongest dudes in the league. Like, he just wouldn't have let that happen. And maybe he would shoot less stupid shots too. That would have been great.
Yeah, no, and he was also on Detroit. It was a fantastic defensive team. So maybe he would have gotten pretty good at defense. What ifs, could ifs, whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's also that you look at this draft and like Lonzo Ball could end up having no NBA career. Josh Jackson could end up having no NBA career. All these guys we think are so talented, you never know. And Kawhi Leonard get picked, like, these guys. The Knicks could easily get a Hall of Famer at pick 8. I mean, they won't. Number 7 is going to the Hall of Fame, but I'm just saying they could, and we could dream that way. So who do you like them getting? Realistically, who you think is going to go? Who you think could fall to them that you would like them to get?
So if Jonathan Isaac ends up falling to the Knicks, then he's going to be really, really good for whoever ends up running the Knicks 3 years from now. Like once they stop running the triangle. So like that's part of the problem, is that like if you're drafting for the Knicks, then you're looking for a guy who would be good in a system that's not going to be there 2 years from now when Phil Jackson is unceremoniously shot into the atmosphere.
So hang on, just Isaac is 6'10". He's a good shooter, good everything, very athletic. I mean, do you think though, like him and Porzingis, like, can you have all these big men coexist on the floor?
I mean, I think Jonathan Isaac is probably going to end up being a center. 5 years from now, I think that the NBA is going to be like, most guys playing the center are going to be like, Thon Maker or like Jonathan Isaac, where it's like they have a little bit of an off dribble game. They're basically, the 4 of old. Rasheed Wallace is going to end up being like the classic center, right? So I think that's what Jonathan Isaac is. And Jonathan Isaac, I mean, he played the 3 in college, and so he can definitely cover guys out on the wing. He's got like a 7'4" wingspan. He's really quick. He's like super explosive laterally. I would be very surprised if he wasn't the second best defender in this draft.
I mean, the weaknesses on him, and I haven't watched him enough, but the weaknesses on him, according to just Draft Express, just sound like another guy on the Knicks. Lacks much strength in both lower and upper body, has a slight frame, shows long-term potential to defend multiple positions, but struggles keeping position defending the post, causing him to pick up fouls, struggles with physical play. I mean, I could be reading Porzingis's. He's
not going to get posted up in the NBA, though.
Like, the Knicks are...
If he's playing like the 4, the marginal 4 next to Porzingis, who is posting up 4s anymore except for the Grizzlies?
I guess I'm thinking the league is becoming a guard league, and the Knicks just don't have a lot of like the Knicks need more versatility on guards and small forwards. Then that's what they a stronger need right now.
Yeah,
I mean, if Isaac's going to be really good, I mean, you have to go. You have to go best player available. But I wonder how big the Knicks are going to have so many big men that and they're going to have no guards.
Yeah, you want to get best player available because you have exactly one player who you can slot in as a long-term starter unless he.
I think Hernan Gomez is good. Yeah, unless he leaves. We can talk about that in a second. But I mean, Hernan Gomez, I think is actually pretty good. I think he's going to develop. I think he's going to be a solid. I have trouble playing Hernan Gomez and Porzingis together right now because of their defense. But having Hernan Gomez,
He's going to be a bench center, right?
But he's going to be I think he'd be a very good one. I think he's going to be like a real asset off the bench, where like he comes in and he gets school like well, not yet, but in the future he may be able to school the other team's like second team.
The point is he's
Get
not
a lot of
like
points from it fast.
he's not like Joel Embiid, where it's like, okay, we have figured out our center position. Like, let's not get another center, right? He is just like a bench center.
You think Philly's really figured out their center for the rest of the time? Because right now their center in 3 years in the league has played 30 games.
I mean, like in theory they did because they had Noel and Embiid, but yeah, I mean, like fair enough.
I mean, Embiid looks fantastic. He looks like a prime, like a couple of years from now could be the top 5 best player in the NBA. But he could also look like a couple of years from now he'll be like a 30 for 30 about what would have been.
Yeah, no, I mean it's certainly possible, but like, I mean. Are you the type of guy who wants to shoot for a championship team? Because if you're going for broke, you're betting the farm on the fact that he's going to play center. Because if you're not, then it doesn't matter because you're not going to contend anyways.
No, so I want to win a title because I'm not. I'd like the Knicks just to be competitive for a whole decade also. But I want to win a title, and I think we need a lot. And we're not next year. We're probably playing for the number 1 pick again because this team's far off. But I feel like guards, wings are a bigger need for this team. And there is some school of thought that Porzingis will develop into a center.
He is a center. He's a center. There's no way that he's not a center. Stop it.
Well, no, but here's the thing. You just said we should get Isaac, who's a center. KP's a center. They have to play together. How is that going to work?
Yeah, but he like Jonathan Isaac is so Jonathan Isaac is like a even more modern Serge Ibaka. He's like he's a weak side shot blocker. The thing with Porzingis,
KP's really good at that.
Well, no, he's not.
No, I mean he's a good help defender. Like, he's not always a good help. He has the ability to be a really good help defender.
No, no,
he
doesn't.
Think so?
He's not fast enough.
Yeah, I mean he's not the quickest.
Yeah, Porzingis is, the only role I could see Porzingis being elite at is like Rudy Gobert basically. And he's not going to be Rudy Gobert. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that he defensively is a center because, I mean, like, God, can you imagine Draymond Green versus Kristaps Porzingis? It would just be awful. I mean, you just can't do that. Like, so Kristaps, like, he needs to just gain like 20 or 30 pounds. And like, I know that I understand the argument against that, but he needs to be a center because at power forward, he's going to kill your defense.
Yeah, no, I see the argument there. The idea of like a guy like a Robin Lopez that was next to him, it didn't look. We had a great rim protection when we had the two of them together. It was pretty solid. If you have a solid center who can play defense next to Porzingis, who can make up for some of his weaknesses, you could have that would work.
Yeah, but long term, Kristaps needs to be the Robin Lopez.
Yeah, I mean I totally get that. So Isaac, I don't think is going to fall anyway, but I can see the case for your basic case is that you will have a super athletic, like 4-5 there, or I guess you have a ton of height, shot blocking. You have these two guys that if they both put on some weight, you'd have a hell of a 4-5 there. Yeah,
his jump shot is projectably going to get better. I think it's like going to develop, and he's probably going to end up being like a 37, 38% 3-point shooter. And now you have a 4 and a 5 who are workable defensively. Like you can have a elite defense with Kristaps at the 5 and Jonathan Isaac at the 4. And like, Isaac would protect the rim a lot and
you just hope Ron Baker gets him the ball.
Dude,
we still have nothing in the guard. We have nothing in the guard position.
I'm trying to think of like wingmen for Kristaps, basically.
We're an empty vessel of a team. I like the Frenchie going there. I feel like Frenchie could develop with Porzingis, and Frenchie plays like solid defense. His shot will develop. I'm hoping like we can get high ceiling, and they can grow together. I don't know.
Frenchie would be great if the Knicks go out and get your guy Porter next year.
Why would anyone come here? I don't understand.
Because they're forced to because of the NBA draft.
Oh, you know what? Actually, you meant Porter. You meant to get drafted in the draft. Yeah, no. That would be great.
Yeah.
I thought you meant Otto Porter, and I was like, I don't understand why Otto Porter would come here.
No. No, that's not gonna happen.
No. I agree that Knicks need some more draft picks, and they need to nail a second round pick also. You need to find value in the draft.
That's a sneaky, good. I really like the Knicks second round pick. I sort of think that there's some really interesting people around that 40th pick.
Who do you like?
Okay, I'm gonna start with Phil Jackson's gonna love this. If I really like Kobe.
Kobe? Is there a guy? Is there a guy named Kobe? Are you kidding around?
Yeah. Kobe Simmons. It's Kobi.
Okay, there you go.
And his best case scenario is Kobe. No, I'm just kidding. So he sort of is that type of guy though, where probably he's gonna end up being like Nick Young, right? He's like 6'4", but if he can control himself, then he has just a super awesome skill set. And could just be really, really good. He I'm trying to think of a really good. He could play the point guard in a system that.
By the way,
Oh, go ahead.
Do you think everyone in the second round is like, let's see if we can find Isaiah Thomas or Draymond Green. Let's find a 6'5" guy who can play center. Let's try to find the shortest guy possible to play center, and find a midget who can run the point. Everyone's obsessed with finding that. They're like, oh, we've discovered this value that other teams have figured out.
I really like the narrative of the next Draymond Green. There's never going to be another Draymond Green. Stop. Draymond Green's one of the best defenders ever. Stop.
He's really good. Yes. It's amazing though, that he won in the goddamn second round.
Light years. You know.
Yeah. So
okay.
Who else?
What about? Do you know John?
I don't know anyone in the second round. I gotta say, my college basketball knowledge is pretty limited. So if you could be making up players and I'd fall for it.
So John is a French 7'2" center. The natural comparison.
Hang on. If the Knicks only draft centers in this draft, I might kill you.
Look, I don't think that Hernan go. Okay, well, so first, the problem is that once you get out of the top 10, I would say picks number 12 through 40, half of the best players in that range are centers.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is this?
Because there's no God. I don't know. It's the way that it worked out.
Okay. So
really, the reason why is because NCAA is still a little bit behind, and a lot of the starting power forwards are actually centers when they get to the NBA.
Okay. So who's this guy? The guy, the French dude you made up?
Yeah. So he's
Jojo. You could be so Amanda Hug and Kiss is a great player. He played.
I want to go get Amanda Hug and Kiss.
I think if you can find Amanda Hug and Kiss, you'll be settled for the night.
Right. So John 7'2". The natural comparison is that he's going to be like Rudy Gobert. So I think that the reason why he's sort of interesting in the second round is because if he really works out, he could be the third big in a rotation that has basically, a guy like Jonathan Isaac at the 4, a guy who is sort of like a small ball 4. And it's Kristaps can slide to the 4, and then John can play the center, and you'll just rotate between the 3 of them. And it's John's the center when small ball 4 is in. So you can get a guy who plays 25 minutes a night, and I just don't think that Willie Hernangomez is good. I'm sorry, I disagree. So
really? But you don't like him at all?
Yeah, I don't think.
Is his defense, offense, or just everything?
I just think that he's a relic of a bygone era.
Are you on the mindset like a guy like Shaq would not be good anymore in this league?
No, dude, no. I mean, like,
okay.
but like Shaq is the outlier. Like, if there was a guy like Shaq right now, then it would be sort of like the whole Steph Curry thing, where it would be like, it would be like Draymond Green. It's like, wow, man, like, why didn't we think of getting like the most athletic 300-pound man ever? I mean, it's like, it's so revolutionary to have a system built around like a guy who could shoot 50% from like 40 feet away. That's because that has literally never happened.
My favorite knock on Shaq growing up was like the people that did not like Shaq would always be like, well, he's only so good because he's so big. I'm like, that's how the entire NBA works.
But he is so big. Like, he is that good though. Like, stop.
Yeah, but they're all really tall in the NBA. They're only so good because they can dunk, and they're only so good because they do this is the NBA.
Yeah, he also is like super graceful and had an amazing touch. I mean, like, yeah, but that's not John though.
I mean, it'd be like, hey, I don't like that Justin Bieber. He's only good because he can sing.
Right? Yeah. No, it's
he's only good because he's got the whatever. Yeah, not that I'm a fan of him.
Or like I don't like that Chris Axmann because he's only good at running a basketball network because he's so smart and handsome.
I mean, have you read the words I have above my my mantle?
Yeah. So, anyways, I have that above my mantle. I tell myself that now. So.
Either way, so Porzingis will not be here very soon.
All right. So, but Frank Mason's the guy.
Frank Mason. People have been talking about Frank. I've heard about Frank Mason. He's supposed to be pretty good. What's his deal with him?
So the reason why I think he might be gettable here, when a week and a half ago he would have gone like around 28, is because the combine just happened, right? And in combine measurements, it's like you lose a few $1 million if you go up and get measured and you happen to be 5'11" and a half. It's like the dating scene, right? The difference between 6 foot and 5 feet is like huge, even though it might not be, right? And I'm 6'4", by the way, so I'm not like, but that's the way that NBA GMs conceptualize guys who are under 6 feet. So he probably lost 10 spots of value because of that. But meanwhile, they measured his wingspan, and it's huge, 6'6". It's literally the longest wingspan of any under 6 foot guy ever recorded in the combine, right? So wingspan is basically a function of height, if you ask me. So Draymond Green is like 6'6", speaking of Draymond, but he's got a 7'4" wingspan or something ridiculous like that. So I think that Frank Mason, because of his wingspan being 6'6", is probably going to play like a point guard who has like 6'4" height.
Well,
here's
Bismack
my Biyombo is another example of a guy who's short, but he's got this incredible wingspan, so he's tall.
But here's the thing: not everyone knows. Like, it's not like you're the only one that knows this stuff. And the people are using all these analytics these days. Why do you think Mason's going to fall to us then?
Well, because it's not like, I mean, I was saying that he was going to get like 30th pick, right? I mean, he was already projected to be like 31, 32. So even if he just loses 5 spots, then the Knicks might be able to grab him, right?
Right. That's a fair point. So I have a question for you. So if the Knicks don't get so you're thinking the Knicks, you go with best player available, I assume, right? There's no needs to pick because the Knicks they need everything basically.
Yeah, and by the way, Tilakina, I have number 6 on my rankings, and then Isaac I have 4, and Malik Monk I have 5. So
who's your top 3? I mean, I guess what order is your top 3?
Okay, so I'm just gonna run through my top 10 actually. All right, so 1 Markel, 2 Josh Jackson, 3 Lonzo Ball, 4 Jonathan Isaac, 5 Malik Monk, 6 Frank Tilakina, 7 OG Anunoby, 8 Jaren Fox, 9 Hamidou Diallo, and 10 Lauri Markkanen, and then 11 Jason Tatum because he's worth mentioning, I guess.
Wow, you dropped Tatum pretty far.
Well, Dennis Smith is number 14, so.
Whoa, Smith! I'm just worried about like a guy coming off ACL. Like they say, he's like a year and a half removed from ACL surgery. I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever.
No, yeah. So I have a question for you. Celtics. If you're the Celtics, and people are talking about the Celtics should trade down, they should not trade down. Sorry, they should trade the pick to get like Paul George or Gordon Hayward. Would you trade the pick and go all in now, or would you draft Fultz if you're Celtics?
I would draft Fultz and hope that the Lakers get a little too cocky about not trading for Paul George. And then at the deadline, you can trade like Marcus Smart and like Kelly Olynyk or something for Paul George.
But to make the decision right now, you wouldn't trade the pick.
Oh, yeah. Right now, I would not trade the pick.
Yeah, if anything, I would say like you probably have a top 3 pick in next year's draft because of the Nets. If anything, you want to trade someone, take Fultz, and then trade that pick, the 2018 pick, and see if you can get a George or someone else.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's ridiculous to trade the pick. I think that you can make the decision to trade Markelle Fultz later.
In some ways, though, I have to say, like, in some ways, the way LeBron beat the crap out of the Celtics, I mean, the series, I guess, is still going, makes me think that, like, it's almost as ridiculous to trade the pick because you should just say, hey, as the Celtics, let's just stockpile these great players. We're going to have a top pick next year, and then we'll be ready to take over once LeBron leaves the league. Listen,
man, you don't like this. God, people have been like, oh man, Danny Ainge is overestimating his cachet of assets. What a dumbass. No, man. Look, okay, all right. Imagine the process, okay? It's like the process happening in Philadelphia, except your team doesn't suck shit. Your team is the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference. Right. They got a process in a box. They got a top 3 pick like 4 years in a row. So like they're getting cracks at like the very best player in the draft, but they don't have to be bad. They are in an incredible position. The thing is, like, people are like, oh man, well, they're not a Jimmy Butler away. You're right. So go get Jimmy Butler and Paul George. You can do it. You have the assets.
Right. I mean,
and sign Gordon Hayward. Do that too.
You still probably won't beat LeBron. So just face the reality of like you could build a team that will be so dominant once LeBron is ready to leave the league.
There's a point at which I don't believe in basketball magic. I don't believe in mysticism. I think that like the best team wins most of the time, right? The best 5 players that you can put out there, maybe the top 7 players that are on your team will win. If that 7 players are used better than their other 7 players and are more talented, then they'll win. And the reality, like the undeniable reality of putting a team together that's like Isaiah Thomas at 1, Jimmy Butler at 2, Paul George at 3, Gordon Hayward at 4, Al Horford at 5, it's just silly. It's disgusting. You have 5.
Yeah, I mean that'd be amazing. Yeah,
and they can do it. They have the assets. That's what people don't get.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they could absolutely do that, and that would be. Would you have to say first of all, does that team beat LeBron?
They totally could. I mean, like Paul George. Imagine if you did you watch the Pacers Cavs series? Do you watch basketball?
I watch basketball.
Have you ever heard of a basketball?
Yeah, I'm not actually. You could just explain the entire. I thought we were going to talk about the New York Mets soon, and it's been a weird baseball podcast so far.
So did you see how great Paul George was like versus LeBron? You know,
he's a very good player. I totally can see you have all these really good players. You're basically playing an all-star team versus LeBron.
Yeah, and 5 Paul Georges.
It's very reasonable that they could beat Cleveland, and Cleveland is going to get older. So that would be an interesting way to go all in. If they do that, I would love to see that.
You know, what happened with the Celtics, right? The reason they're getting blown off the court, I don't think is mysticism. Like, yes, LeBron is incredible, but let's really look at this, right? The best player in the series is LeBron. The second best player is Kyrie. The third best player is Kevin Love, right?
And now Isaiah Thomas is out for the rest of the series.
Right. But even if Isaiah Thomas was there, he's still like not as good as their third best option.
Boston has a lot of very good players, but they're lacking the all-star level players.
Yeah, well, they don't exist. I mean, I think Isaiah Thomas, and I don't mean this as an insult, but it's definitely not a compliment. I think Isaiah Thomas is a system player.
You think so?
Yeah. Why? So I think Brad Stevens is a wizard. I think that, he looked at the team and said, gee, if Isaiah Thomas had a little bit more separation than he normally would going into like a dribble handoff or a pick and roll, he'd be so good. So let's structure our entire offense around Isaiah Thomas and set multiple off-ball screens so that when Isaiah Thomas comes off a screen, not just like his defender will be stopped by a screen. That will have happened 2 screens ago, right? And now Isaiah Thomas has that little bit of extra separation that he can make a shot.
Isaiah Thomas is very good in Phoenix and very good in Sacramento also.
Right, and I think that's the quality of player that Isaiah Thomas is. I just don't think that he's just not a dominant player. The way that he's going and getting those points are just different than the way that LeBron does.
Right. No, that's fair. I mean, so here's a question for you. Can you think of a trade that has been more lopsided than the Celtics Nets trade? Is that going to go down as the worst trade in NBA history?
Yeah.
I can't even think of a trade that could have been. The Nets got two guys who were at the end of their career with very little left in the tank, and they gave up all these top picks. It's unbelievable how much the Nets gave up to the Celtics.
It's disgusting. It's basically the point I'm trying to make.
So this is a Knicks podcast. So Porzingis. So basically, the latest developments. We all knew that Porzingis skipped his exit meeting with Phil Jackson. Why do other teams do exit meetings? Is this something that every team does, or is it just a Phil thing?
Yeah, every team does it, and players normally go.
Okay. Are you pissed? I guess who do you are more annoyed at, Phil, or more annoyed at Porzingis for the situation?
Is this a joke?
I mean, just some people have said hey, whatever it is, he's still his boss, and he should go to the meeting. Whatever you want to say, you could just air it out with him at the meeting.
Well, I understand why Porzingis is resigned to the situation. It's why I'm resigned to the situation. The owner of the Knicks has decided that Phil Jackson will not be fired, and Phil Jackson has not stepped away. So I get it. There's nothing to do. So you go to that meeting and you're Chris Stapps and you say, "Gee, Phil, maybe you should stop being a dumbass." He's not going to acquiesce to that.
I think also the rumors were that he asked a lot of weird questions to people. So I imagine Porzingis hears about a couple of the interviews, and they're he asked me these super odd questions about Zen, and Porzingis is this is freaking pointless. I'm not going to go.
Yeah, I get it.
And this is his way of saying, hey, I want this team to get better, and we have to stop being a complete train wreck. You figure this out in 2 years. I'm just going to pack my bags.
So you remember Greg Monroe, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're a first-round pick, normally you get the opportunity to take an extension off of your rookie contract, which is making the leap where 1 year you're making $4 million, and then the next year you're making $25, right? So the vast majority of players have team control because of that for a really long time. But Greg Monroe decided to forego the $20 million a year that he ended up getting just because he was no, this Pistons thing is not going anywhere. I can't play next to Drummond. I'm out of here. Yeah. If Phil Jackson isn't gone by the time that Chris Stapps has the option of extending, he's going to deny it, and it's going to be a media feeding frenzy. It's going to be nuts because players just don't do it. I mean, no matter how upset you are, you just don't turn down your rookie extension. It is nuts. So I think Chris Stapps is fully prepared to do that because he's fully aware that he's a superstar. And if Phil Jackson is still around, I think that he is going to value being the arbiter of his own destiny and also going and get some really fine chicks apparently on the Clippers, right? So that's on the table, right? So you can either go talk about the triangle, a system that won't be there if you have a long-term future with the team, and you can talk about it with a guy who won't be there if you have a long-term future with the team, or you can just go and get the hell out of New York, just cool off over the course of the summer.
I mean, the crazy thing is also we know the triangle, you need a system, and that system could be okay if everyone buys in. The defense is still crap. The roster is still crap. And that's the bigger issues than there's so many issues here. And basically in 2 years, we're going to start a new rebuild, basically. It's what's so frustrating. It's frustrating that Phil has to be okay, now 3 years, we're year 4, and we're now we're finally going all in on the triangle. If you want the triangle to work, make all in on year 1, get guys that can do it. If you're in year 4 and you still haven't figured this crap out, then you need to come up with some new ideas.
There are complicated systems, but Thibodeau's an example of this, right? There are complicated systems, the Timberwolves haven't figured out how to do the Thibodeau thing, right? But I believe that they will because the Chicago Bulls roster would have killed for him in a way that they are just uninterested in doing for Hoiberg, their coach right now, right?
Right.
So you can run a complicated system if you have a compelling coach, but the reason why David Blatt fizzled out is because you just can't implement a complicated system if you're not a good communicator. So, and if you're unlikable and you're David Blatt. So
and you're not the coach.
Right. Yeah. And basically what the situation that any coach, while Phil Jackson is GM, it's like if Phil Jackson is deciding the way that the Knicks need to be coached, then whoever is coach is just like a puppet, and he's not going to be respected, and none of the players, like, they could go home and like do their research and come to practice and know how to run a triangle. It's like not too complicated for guys like Melo to understand. Melo plays chess, right? I mean, if he can play chess, he can run a triangle. But it's too complicated if you just don't feel like you have to learn it.
Well, it's too complicated if you're not going to fully buy into it. And it's a system that you really have to fully buy into. Any system you have to fully buy into to make the team good, and you need the coach to be there. And the one thing that Phil and has never done is it seems like he blames Melo for the system not working, and they've never benched Melo. They've never held him accountable at all for not buying in. They could just say, hey, Melo, you're not buying in. We're going to bench you, or we're going to trade you a lot earlier. You feel Melo's the issue, then you should have traded him a couple of years ago.
Or you should have traded him when D'Antoni was like, this team's not going to work unless you, A, are running pick and rolls, and B, are playing the 4. I'll tell you what, one of the best teams in the league a couple of years from now is going to be the Philadelphia 76ers, because you run a 4-5 pick and roll with Simmons and Joel Embiid, you're just like, there's nothing to do about it. If you're playing Portland and Aminu is playing the 4 and you've got Plumlee, well, I mean, Plumlee's on Denver now, but like, let's imagine you had like Mason Plumlee, right? He just would crap his pants off of that because it's like, there's nothing to do about it. You just can't defend that. So you could have been doing that 10 years ago because Mike D'Antoni's an amazing coach and he's revolutionary. That's the point that you needed to trade Melo, because it's like, Melo, this team will be 10, 15 wins better if you actually did this and you could actually contend. And he was like, I don't want to sacrifice my body.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's been saying this, Melo, about this for years. The thing is, you knew all this about Melo when you re-signed him for the contract. You should have at some point moved on from him. And you waited till the last possible moment to now you're finally like, I'm ready to move on, and it's all his fault. It's your fault. You kept him here. Like you knew who he was when you signed him. You knew he's been in the league. He's been in the league for a decade when Phil thought he could change his entire game.
It's never black and white until it's black and white. I mean, D'Antoni was like, if we want to succeed, you have to play the 4. And it was true. And he said no. Now it's black and white at that point, right? I mean, when he's in Denver, it's like you could reasonably assume that he won't change. And I understand trading for him. I mean, you really should have waited for him to get to free agency, but that's a whole other conversation.
Obviously.
But I can understand building around him off of the chance that he'll change his game. But at the point that you know that he won't, yeah, I mean, it's over. I mean, Carmelo has had a great career, but he just doesn't care that much. I mean,
you could also, you could talk to George Karl for 10 minutes and know you should be building around Melo. I mean, everything Karl has said about him is totally fair. I don't know why Karl had to come out with a book to, complain about him, but everything he said was totally fair.
I mean, Michael Jordan's a psychopath.
That's why he's so good. You need to find guys who are, complete psychopaths. You need to go in the draft and find a guy who, would, kill his grandmother just to get a couple extra points in the game.
Well, I'm just saying, it's there are people who are hard to deal with personality wise. George Karl being one of them, honestly.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I mean, the point at which you're you can be really hard to deal with, right? I mean, J.R. Smith is like this, but the Cavaliers said, J.R. Smith, I get it, you're a meme. You can meme all you want, all right? You can do sweeping motions. You can continue to lay the pipe if that's what you need to do. But this is going to be your role. You're going to play lockdown defense and you're going to shoot threes and you're going to be the 4th, 5th option always. If you take dumbass shots, you're going to get benched. That's something that the Knicks could not do. And maybe Melo, if he had been traded at that point, right, and traded to, I don't know, let's say the Celtics, right? Brad Stevens is a great coach. Perhaps Melo listens to him when Brad Stevens is like, look, Melo, here's what you need to do, and we're not going to be good unless you do it. Or if he was traded to the Spurs, I mean, oh my God. Or, I mean, hopefully Melo's on the Heat next year.
Well,
so
that's the theory about him going to Detroit. He'd be in a system where he truly respected, so he'd have to follow. First, he doesn't always truly respect the system he's in or the coaches or everyone around him, so he thinks he has to do everything. But if you put him next to Chauncey Billups, he respects Chauncey Billups to such a degree that he plays better because Chauncey Billups is there, and Billups makes him better. If you put him next to LeBron, Melo would look awesome because he would respect LeBron to that level. J.R. Smith looks awesome because he has LeBron telling him, it's not just the coach telling him, it's like LeBron telling him, hey, I'm possibly one of the greatest ever, and you're going to listen to me, and this is what your role is going to be if you want to be a good member of this team.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Deion Waiters is like totally capable of being J.R. Smith, but they asked him to do something that would have helped them win, and he didn't do it. So he got traded. That's the bottom line, right? And I understand Carmelo now not wanting to play the 4 because getting 10 extra wins on a team that's crap like isn't that valuable, and like what's the point, right? I mean, they could maybe be the 8th seed instead of the 9th pick in the draft. But when you're a 50-win team, right? Like they were really, really good when D'Antoni was coaching the Knicks. They were really good for one season, and you get the opportunity where it's like, look, do this thing, and we're not going from 30 to 40. We're going from 52 to 62. Then if you don't do that, then like, bye, you know?
Yeah, no, and obviously D'Antoni also, now he looks like a genius with James Harden.
Well, yeah. I mean,
so
D'Antoni is always, but go ahead. Yeah,
he's always been a genius. He's always been a genius. But you know what? His star fell though after the Knicks, and then he went to the Lakers, and people were like, and people started putting more of the credit on Steve Nash, and people said like he was great, but like he became kind of a joke, even though the NBA is kind of built around the D'Antoni system these days, and so he needed to prove it again, basically, and proving it again, I think you had to feel like D'Antoni's star really fell before he got to Houston.
Yeah, well, the Knicks are toxic, so.
Yeah, no, the Knicks ruined everything. They've ruined one of the greatest coaches ever now. I do think if Phil was the coach with Melo, that would be the only way I could see Melo really changing his game, because he would have respected. I feel like he talks they talk, and Phil thinks when in the meeting Melo really respects him and he really will try to follow it, but then you try to coach him through a surrogate and it just doesn't work. Phil has to be there in his ear all the time. And Melo at first was like, I'm going to buy into this, but then he realizes Phil is out to lunch half the time at his job, so how much does he really take him seriously anymore?
Yeah, I'm skeptical about that being true, but I definitely understand what you're saying, because you can coach sort of that early 90s yelling, you know, like not finesse. I mean, the opposite of Luke Walton, cool guy coaching bro Luke, right?
Yeah.
You can like yell and like gesticulate and freak out and get in people's faces, but only if you have Greg Popovich caliber cachet, only if you can command that level of respect. And I understand saying that Phil Jackson is on that level. I'm just not sure that he might be a little too much. Like he's, you know.
I mean, he's worked with some very difficult players in the past and made it work. Whatever. We're not going to ever see the scenario, the hypothetical scenario that Phil would actually have coached Melo, and I think it would have had to have happened a couple of years ago, not now. Going back to KP, since we're talking about since KP was in the news, Phil met with KP's brother. Apparently they've had almost no contact with KP since the season ended, and Phil met with his brother, who's his agent, and it didn't really go anywhere at all.
Yeah, I mean that's unsurprising.
Yeah, I know. They're saying, did you hear about it? Whatever.
Oh no, I did not hear the news report. I heard that his brother said we're happy in New York, or we're not looking to get traded. You know,
he met with him, and then so the Knicks have cut ties with Josh Longstaff, the assistant who's the closest with Porzingis. So one of the guys who was a holdover from Woodson's staff, who apparently was pretty tight with KP, has now been fired.
Longstaff?
Yeah, I know. I mean, that guy, how do you not, with that name, become a porn star? I mean,
right.
I mean, they're like, what's your porn name? I'm using it.
I am my porn name.
Yeah. But apparently he worked out with KP in the offseason last year, and people are like saying this is kind of a weird move the Knicks have made. They take your coach that seems who had the tightest relationship with KP and fire him. It's just like a way of like, you don't go to my meeting and you're not respecting me, so Phil comes back and fires like the coach that's close to you. In a conspiracy mindset, at least.
Yeah, it's frustrating. God. I don't know.
As the world turns, the Knicks. We have questions. You want to do some questions with us?
Sure, I can do questions.
Well, you have to do the questions with us.
I've got answers. I've got all the answers.
Yeah, well, I'll say if you don't do the questions, you're recording the show, so it's not going to really go anywhere. My questions without you.
right.
So first we have a couple emails. Let me pull up the emails, which I thought I had ready, but I did not have ready because
I don't have them ready.
you don't have them ready. That's weird.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Just Jay, if you're listening from the Thai prison you're in, do you have the questions ready?
No.
Okay, so first question. Email from Sam, our listener Sam. He said, the NBA is basically the WWE now. Boring storylines, predictable matches, Warriors, Cavs. The lack of competition is disgusting. I love the league when you had Prime Nash and Amari in Phoenix, Dwight in Orlando, Big Three in Boston, Kobe and Gasol, Melo in Denver, Vince Carter and Kidd in the net on the Nets, D. Will and Boozer, CP3 in New Orleans, even LeBron in Cleveland for the first time. It's just not fun anymore. It's just Cleveland, Golden State, and screw everyone else. Ever since Stern left and Silver arrived, it's been trash, man. I don't know how they can fix this shit.
Well, they could they could step into the draft lottery and make sure that the Celtics get the number 1 pick.
Yes,
that's one way of
that's
fixing
one
it.
thing. So if I was going to fix it beyond fixing the draft, one thing I would do is if you really want to fix this situation where all the talent is on 2 teams, you can make a real a hard cap. If you had a hard NBA cap, then teams would have a tough time keeping all their top players.
Yeah, one thing I've heard that's interesting is the idea of having a 3-tier superstar system where every team can have a 1, 2, and a 3 designated contract. If you have Steph Curry, then he's going to be your number 1 guy, and number 1 guys make $40 million. And that means you can't have any $40 million other guys. You have to be a number 2, which makes 35, or a number 3 that makes 30, and there's no gray area, right? You can't have 2 number 1s.
So a number 2 elsewhere would go to somewhere else to be a number 1, basically.
Right. If you say to KD, hey, we'll make you the number 1 in OKC, then he maybe stays instead of being like the number. I mean, they would presumably have given Draymond the number 2 the year before, or Clay, and it's like you already have 1, 2, 3. So like, what is he going to do? Like, go and sign as like an average role player? You know?
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, like that would make sense. I mean, like, wouldn't you think a hard cap would solve a lot of this also? Because then if you didn't have the Larry Bird rule and all these BS rules, a mid-level exception, you had like $90 million. That's all you could spend. Then you'd have to really make some tough decisions and cut some guys, and you wouldn't be. It would be hard to stack a roster.
Well, so I think that we're in a unique position where it's sort of a coagulation of events, but basically, on one side you have the best player who's ever played basketball. Sorry, everyone, it's LeBron. It's not. I mean, it's not MJ. Like it's a team sport, and LeBron helps your team in a way that MJ like doesn't. So
I don't want to debate it, but I think we can all say it's 1-2 right now. Whichever order you want, those 2 guys are the top 2.
Yeah, right 1A, 1B. So yeah, fair enough, right? And then on the other side, because of again like a just bunch of crazy circumstances like the cap exploding, you have the best team ever assembled. And bottom line, I do want the team to be imbalanced, and I do want to see LeBron every year in the finals against the best team ever assembled. And I think that theater is worth it to sort of put off this thing. But the thing is, this is going to be the 3rd time in a row the Cavs and the Warriors have met in the finals. And now it's time to start introducing other contenders. Like, we've had it 3 times in a row. I'm glad that we've had it 3 times in a row. But yeah, I mean, 5 times in a row would be too much. And I think that they're adjusting.
I feel like also this year, like the season / playoffs have seemed pointless. But you know, like you have a battle scene in some like cheesy action movie where like the 2 guys that are supposed to fight in the war, in like the big war scene, like they're just taking people, like they're attacking them, just throwing them to the side, and they're gonna meet in the middle and fight.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that's what's going on now. Like the Celtics are like, get out of my way, Raptors! Get out of my way, Celtics! I'm gonna beat the and then the Warriors are like, come on, Spurs, get out of my way. And whoever, like they're just like in this weird battle scene where there's like everyone else just like pauses while they wipe everyone out of the way and they're gonna fight in the middle, basically.
And you can only have a good action movie if that final scene is that good. And right now it is. Normally it isn't.
Right now you're getting, I don't know what would be the equivalent. Right now you're going to have like, this is the Superman versus Batman we actually want to see. Not the actual movie that was made, but this is the one you wanted to see. These 2, I mean, we'll see actually how it turns out when they actually play each other. But you have these 2 guys, 2 teams. You can't beat Superman, you can't beat Batman. Let's see what happens when they fight each other.
I think that that's sort of the bottom line right now in a way that it wasn't 5 years ago. It only started getting people upset by now, the third year. And I think that that's about right. I think that the trajectory has gone its course, and now past laws like, the KD thing and the Supermax, like now you start actually trying to get the league to be even because, it's like run its course.
Well, it's like baseball, football. I mean, baseball has no salary cap, but they still make it work. Like, you don't know going into the year who's going to be in the World Series, who's going to be in the Super Bowl. And there are lots of surprises year after year, and it just makes it more interesting, the whole season in general. The NBA has become the most predictable, most annoying sport in that way. On the other hand, these finals should be an awesome finals. I am so excited to see Cleveland versus Golden State. It should be, but is it worth having a season like this to get this kind of fun? And next year, who do you think is going to go into the finals? I think we're all going to predict Golden State versus Cleveland again.
I mean, Golden State versus the Celtics, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, like there's a point at which this is going to end. The problem is teams like New York and teams like the Kings, right? Because if you want equity around the league, there's so much luck involved that you just can't make mistakes. And one of the worst things that I think has happened in terms of competition in the league in general is last offseason, the Milwaukee Bucks decided to give a ton of money to Spencer Hayward or something. They gave $12 million a year for like 4 years. They gave a bunch of dumb contracts to players that they didn't need to give money to. And that sucks because like they have Giannis Antetokounmpo. When you have a guy like that who took a pay cut to stay on your team, and you have a guy like Chris Middleton who's underpaid, that's like having Steph and Clay. And if you execute things perfectly from there, you can build this incredible team that also has Kevin Durant and also has Draymond Green. But they just made that one mistake of signing $30 million of dead cap. The Warriors don't have that. The Cavs don't have that. Everything is efficiently used.
It's also basketball by nature. One or two players can make such an outsized impact that like that's also the problem with it. It always has been is that you have Michael Jordan, you have a decent chance of going to the finals. You have LeBron, you have a decent chance of going to the finals. In baseball, you have Mike Trout, who looks like a once in a generation type hitter. He looks so good, and the Angels, it doesn't get them to the World Series, doesn't even get them to the playoffs a lot of the years.
I'm just saying that if everyone had a comparable level of competence, then
no, I agree with you. Yes, if everyone was building their teams in a correct way, they'd have more competition. And right now, there's been a substantial lack of competition, more so than it has been in the past.
But I think it's fundamentally because of teams like the Nets under Billy King. You can't just do that to your organization. Or the Knicks, right, with Phil Jackson. Like, you can't just like squander this opportunity for Kristaps. Like, if they just built around Kristaps in a smart way, the Knicks could be a really, really great team, but they're just squandering the opportunity. There's too many teams that are doing that, and the teams that aren't, the players that are making the right decision and the managements that are making the right decision, they're really good. The Spurs are still really good. There could be 6 or 7 other Spurs, but they're not.
There's also been a lot of just bad luck as far as having competition. You really should have seen every year in the East, it should have been a battle of Cleveland versus Chicago. You had Derrick Rose wins the MVP at 22 or 23 years old, look like he'd be a perennial all-star, one of the best players in the league, and it would be Chicago. It would be such a great matchup, Chicago versus Cleveland, and that fell apart when Rose got injured.
Yeah, sometimes you're going to get the Golden State Warriors, and like that's fine, that's cool.
It's also the messed up thing that happened last year was that you had a team, you were like, oh, Golden State has some competition. Maybe OKC could take them out, and Durant says maybe, but maybe be even easier to join Golden State. So they basically swept the legs of their best competitor.
Yeah. So I was thinking about the whole Celtics getting the number 1 pick in the draft. You know, this last year, the Cavaliers traded a future first-round pick for Kyle Korver for a 36-year-old white dude. And that's what is supposed to be the deal. Like, the Cavs, like, you know, they don't have very many of their first-round picks because if you're a team that's making the decision to trade your first-round picks, it's supposed to be because you're almost there, right?
Right.
It's supposed to be because, like, you're so good that those first-round picks aren't going to have value. The level of incompetence that it takes to trade your first-round picks to win now and not win now is absurd, right? Like, you just can't do that.
I mean, the Knicks have been doing it for more than a decade, but yes, I agree with you. So Jorge writes, remember the last time we got the 8th pick? Curry went 7th, which we all remember, but he's pointing it out to us because why not? And then Chris wrote us, sent us a link that just said, not this Chris, but the Knicks can't even get the draft right, an article from 538.com, and it was just showing basically how the Knicks basically always pick either at their draft position or worse. They always do terrible as far as draft position, and it's unbelievable. But that was basically the sum of the article. And then Jamel wrote an article saying, and he said, please read in the subject that said, I do not want the Knicks to get Fultz. Have you guys seen his defense? Guys were blowing by him all year on the college level. Ball is much better all around, and Fox is much better on defense and better playmaker. But we will draft a French kid and have to wait 4 years for him to be as good as Ball will be in his first year. I know you guys don't like Ball because of his pops, but he is a true point guard that can shoot. Thanks. Anyway, this was that was sent before the draft lottery, and obviously we have no shot of drafting most of those players.
Wait, so what am I responding to?
You don't have to respond to it. We read the emails that people send us.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that guy's dumb, so your listener's dumb. Fultz is amazing.
Thank you, Chris, for insulting our listeners. Then the questions from Facebook. Martin writes, talk about the current players that are having workouts with the Knicks and which players you think are a good fit. We kind of talked about that already. By the way, is there anyone that you're like, do you think Phil is going to, how seriously is Phil going to say, is this guy good for the triangle when drafting?
I 100% think he's going to think about that.
Ben writes, do you think we'll try and move up via trade, etc.? Can the Knicks move up via trade? Do you think the Knicks are going to try?
Yeah, I think they could trade Kristaps.
I kind of don't want to do that. Would you trade Kristaps?
If I was the Knicks?
No, if you were Orlando.
Would trade for Kristaps?
No, I was just messing with you. Of course you're the Knicks. You're the Knicks. Would you trade Kristaps?
No. Well, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Well, if I was the Knicks, would I be dumb?
Well, the one trade that's been floated, would you do if the Celtics would give you Fultz? Would you do Fultz for Kristaps?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it either. But I can see the argument. Like, if you're going to do that, maybe if you get Fultz and something else from the Celtics, maybe the argument's there.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's not insane.
What if you trade the Knicks package the 8th pick, and we're not going to trade KP. Let's say we trade 8th pick, and you can't package Melo because no one above. I guess the Lakers. Maybe I think he'd say yes to go to the Lakers. And the Lakers probably aren't getting. You think the 8th pick and Melo to the Lakers? The Lakers switch with him?
No, it's Lonzo, man.
Yeah. So then there's nothing else, and then you could package Hernan Gomez with the 8th pick. Do you think you could switch with like Orlando or Philly or I guess Sacramento?
No.
Yeah. Well, you think Hernan Gomez is garbage, so I guess there's no point even asking you that question.
I don't. If Melo was an asset, he would have already been traded. So.
And here's an argument. Would you trade switch? Do you think the Knicks should try to explore trading switching with Dallas or Sacramento at 10? Like if you like Frenchie, you think you can still get him at 9 or 10? Do you try to make a trade where you can get a future asset from Dallas, like a number one pick for next year?
The number 8 pick is actually a decent place to be. I think there's a huge drop off at 10. I think you can pick a really, really good player at 8.
No, but Dallas picks 9, and you're thinking Dallas doesn't want Frenchie. Frenchie's going to be available. I can still get Frenchie at 9. Why not try to work a trade with Dallas and try to get that? Because maybe Dallas wants someone. They want Smith, and they think the Knicks are going to take Smith. Can we work a trade with the flip with them and get another asset for that?
No, I don't think so. I just don't think that makes sense because the Mavs very well might be trying to get Tilakina because the Mavs have a hard-on for French point guards like Rodrigue Beaubois. So
you work out the trade ahead of time. They swapped Chris Webber and Anthony Hardaway. You can say hey Dallas, we know you want Smith. We're gonna take Smith. You take Frenchie, assuming they're both available, and we'll swap you if you give us this. Give us next year's first round pick.
Well, no, I don't think that's possible because I think if the Knicks were to do that and say hey, we're going to pick Tilakina and we know that you have him number 1 at your spot, I think the Mavs would be okay, we'll go ahead and pick Dennis Smith and see how that goes. And then if it's vice versa, if the Knicks are like, oh, we'll do it, we'll pick Dennis Smith, then the Mavs are like, okay, Tilakina is pretty good.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's totally fair. It would be great if the Knicks could, good teams somehow find the way. If the Spurs, they'd make that work. They would actually do that trade. It'd be nice if the Knicks could extract more value from this draft.
I think that 8 is a really good pick. I think that, the way that most drafts work, it's like, there's tiers, right? And in fact, I have a color-coded tier, right? I have Markelle Fultz, gold, 2-3, Lonzo and Josh Jackson, green. And then 4 through 11, I have orange. I don't think that the 8th pick is all that much worse than the 5th pick.
No, I totally... The entire argument basically is just saying, like, if you find out Dallas values... I mean, the Knicks probably would fall for this than more likely than Dallas would fall for this. But if you find they value a player more so, you could say, we're fine with either one of those players, but we're going to take Smith unless you guys want to give us a trade, a swap with us. But it probably will not happen. Kenny writes, a lot of people are saying we should take Ntilikina at 8, but I don't hear many others teams rating him that high. Is he worth a first-round pick and maybe get him in the early second round? Will he fall that low? Also, if that above is the case, what are the odds of sneaking Malik Monk, as all the talk of last week is Fultz, Ball, Jackson, Fox, Smith, Tatum? Well, I don't think the Ntilikina is not falling the second round.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Also, I think just because teams don't rate him as high, like Ntilikina is a reasonable guy to take at 8. If he turns out to be great, that'd be wonderful. But the Knicks could take him and not feel any like. The Knicks could take Ntilikina at number 8 and feel good about themselves.
Well, so, I mean, there's also another problem where it's like the Knicks might think that he's going to fall to number 15, but they think that he's going to. And if they think that Ntilikina is like the last good player in the draft, then you're taking an awful risk by trading from like 9 to 15.
No. Well, I would only trade down 1 or 2 picks, basically. And that if you really think the guy's going to fall. But you really have to do it, and you have to basically conspire with this team before the picks are made and have the trade worked out thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that there's only one person on Earth who knows what each team is going to pick ahead of time, and that's Woj, and he's not telling Phil Jackson. So it's like, you could like call up every team and say, hey, who are you going to pick at 15? And they're just going to say, fuck off, Phil. Go away.
I mean, Phil's just not. I mean, Phil has been he's been so schooled in every trade he's made that I just have so little. I think he could draft, if he just sticks with 8, I think that he has decent scouts. He's been listening to his scouts, and we could get a good player. But him to make any kind of trade is probably not going to work out. I mean, I still go back to the freaking J.R. Smith Shumpert trade. You gave both guys away. You thought you had to trade Shumpert to get rid of J.R. Smith, and Cleveland, upon getting J.R. Smith, the first thing they do is make J.R. Smith one of their starting 5. So immediately you're like, oh, maybe they had some value for J.R. Smith. Maybe we could have gotten more than just having to give away Iman Shumpert just to get rid of J.R. Smith.
Yeah, it's good.
And Monk, a lot of people have Monk falling to the Knicks. Maybe
so one thing I wanted to say about Monk, he could totally fall to the Knicks. I could see that happening. The thing I've been saying about Monk is that he's going to get someone fired, because either, let's say he goes like number 8 to the Knicks, then the GM who picks 7 is going to end up getting fired, because it's like, how could you not take Monk? He's like a 30 points per game scorer. Or the guy who picks Monk at 7 is going to get fired because he's like Smush Parker. So one way or the other, someone's going to get fired.
I was hoping you would say he's going to get someone fired, and then my thought was, please Phil, please Phil, please Phil.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, he's just, to me, it sounds like from just the profile, he's not the guy the Knicks necessarily need right now. But he could be a great player, and who the heck even knows? Sasha writes, my wish is Ntilikina and Isaac, Fultz, Jackson, Tatum, and Fox are unfortunately already gone. Do you have other favorites? I don't want to see Smith and Laurie. So he likes Isaac. You like Isaac.
I mean, I think that Tatum would be a good fit for the triangle.
Yeah, there you go. Jaime writes, so while Jay is gone in prison, let's talk about the Mets more. What do you think is the biggest problem right now, other than injuries? I
Baseball
think
sucks.
come on. Jay already says that when he's not here. When he's here, the Mets are a disaster right now. But I'd say the biggest problem, the pitching has been horrible. I would fire the pitching coach, get a new pitching coach. I think that would be my first move right now. Some way to you need to shake stuff up with the Mets right now. And a new pitching coach would be a big deal because the Dan Worthington has just sucked basically.
Well, I think the problem with the Mets is that baseball sucks.
Oh, an enlightened view. Jaime writes, who has the biggest draft pick? Who has the biggest draft pick mistake? The Knicks. What was the biggest draft pick mistake the Knicks have ever gotten, in your opinion?
Eddie Curry.
Well, who was draft pick that the Knicks actually drafted? Who was the biggest mistake?
Oh, did they trade for Eddie Curry?
Yeah, he was on the Bulls first. You don't remember that?
No, I forgot.
Yeah.
I mean, now I remember, but I forgot.
Yeah, this guy. Who's the worst draft pick the Knicks? I would say the biggest draft pick mistake. Well, I was gonna say Jordan Hill was just a bizarre move because they drafted him and traded him like 2 months later and clearing space for LeBron, which is a weird way to treat your number 8 draft pick. They immediately thought Jordan Hill was a bust when they got him. It's just like
Good
it's like,
job.
hey, I mean Jordan Hill was never that good, but you might want to take a half a second to figure out if the guy's good. They traded him like 2 months after the draft, or 2 months after the season started.
Yeah. I'm looking back at their draft history.
They make some weird moves.
Yeah, so part of it is that the real mistake is when you take Oluwaseyi at number 1, and the Knicks used to be good, so they weren't getting the number 1 pick.
Yeah, and then the Knicks were just bad at keeping their draft picks. That was the bigger mistake, was just not having draft picks.
Yeah.
The Knicks weren't terrible, and they even drafted some Nene was a good draft pick. Then he just didn't play for the Knicks. Yeah, I don't know who the who's the worst pick. They've had some bad picks. And second round, you can't kill them with any second round picks because there were a lot of second round picks who most of them do not work out in the second round.
Yeah, they've been decent at drafting.
Gilliam writes, this is Ntilikina against players his age. It's a video he showed. So like college level competition, I say, and hope we take him. I think a lot of people now are on board with the Ntilikina bandwagon. Brian writes, why are some people wanting to go after expensive free agents? Isn't it clear that we should be trying to lose as many games as possible next season for a shot at Michael Porter or Donik, whatever how you pronounce his name? 3 extra wins this season were the difference between picking 8th and picking 4th. So should we be all into the tank next year?
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get good over the summer.
I mean, I would just say, I wouldn't go in for big free agents. I would, whatever roster we have, play. If they end up being good, we can keep going with that. But if they suck, figure that out by January and call it a tank from there.
You just don't want the 2nd or 3rd pick, and you don't want the 9th either.
You don't want what?
You don't want the 2nd or 3rd pick, and you also don't want the 9th.
Why not the 2nd or 3rd pick?
Because the 2nd and 3rd pick next year are generational centers. This guy Bamba is going to be like the next, I don't know. He's going to be really, really good. And it's going to kind of hurt to pick him because I think that he's going to be redundant. So, yeah, I think that the 2nd and 3rd best players in next year's draft is DeAndre Ayton and Mohamed Bamba, and they're both centers. And you sort of put yourself in a weird situation if you end up getting 2 centers, you know?
Well, in fairness, also a lot will change between now and next year, so.
Oh, wait, actually, I forgot about Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic, there hasn't been a player in a really long time, and he's supposed to go around top 5 for sure. Yeah. He could run the... Wait, where is Kristaps from?
Latvia.
Oh, okay. So Luka Doncic is from Slovenia, and he could run the triangle, be the Kobe in a triangle for sure. He's a super smart guy, hits difficult shots. I love Luka Doncic.
One thing I'm positive about is that next year at this time, Phil will be saying, next year, we're finally going to commit to the triangle.
Yeah. I think that he should commit to the tetrahedron.
Yeah. The I would say the going after big name, going after Drew Holiday. First of all, there's no reason in God, unless the Knicks can just somehow outpay give him a max deal, and no one else gives him a max deal, there's no way Drew Holiday's coming here. And I don't know why you really need. What would that do? If you got a Drew Holiday on the Knicks, what would happen next?
You can basically draft the next Drew Holiday just by getting Tilakina. I mean, Tilakina, he's sort of like, I think his worst case scenario is like Drew Holiday, honestly. His best case scenario is like Gary Payton.
I mean, first of all, the worst case scenario being Drew Holiday. I hate when people say that about a draft pick. The worst case scenario, he's a borderline all-star level talent.
You can say stuff like that about guys over in the EuroLeague because they're playing pro basketball. I mean,
I think in fairness, most of the guys drafted are not going to be good NBA players. It's just a fact. And so it's like, for the most part, the upside, a lot of guys can have upside, but for the most part also, a lot of guys, the downside risk is they never have an NBA career. And that'll happen.
I mean, look, the worst case scenario is that none of this matters because like the bombs drop tomorrow. So like in a reasonable world, the worst case scenario is that he's Drew Holiday, but it's certainly possible that the worst case scenario is actually that he gets shot in the head one day. I mean,
no, I'm just saying like that's a pretty high worst case scenario. Like you're like that's a pretty the guy's going 8th, and you're saying worst case he's as good as Drew Holiday, who is a pretty solid point guard.
Well, yeah, he is. I think that perhaps the highest floor in this draft is Tilakina. Oh, it's actually Markelle Fultz. So, but
okay,
yeah.
I mean that's a high floor. Okay, totally. That's just a higher floor than I would expect than number 8.
And a lower ceiling than most guys. Like his floor is so high that despite his low ceiling, I have him number 6th. I mean, he's just like not going to be like a generational player. Like there will be guys picked after him that will be worse, but there will probably be guys picked before him that are going to be There are going to be guys after him who are better and guys before him who are worse.
I knew we were going with that.
Yeah.
Tristan writes, apparently the Knicks are interested in hiring, where are they now, Prigioni as an assistant coach. What former Knick would you want as an assistant head coach? Throw in some comedy options, please. I believe we're going to go with Charles Oakley here. I like him for comedy and just for the fact that it would be nice to have Charles Oakley screaming at players and getting them to play better defense.
Latrell Sprewell.
Oh, well, the Knicks would definitely win choke under him. Terrible joke. I don't know. Patrick Ewing, I think he was a pretty good Knick.
Yeah, but like that's not funny though because he actually is a coach. Like,
yeah, it's just really sad actually.
Yeah, there's something out there. I don't know.
And with the guys the Knicks are hiring as coach, there's really no reason Patrick Ewing should have been a coach to the team. At least it would get like fans excited. Like nothing
Jason
else.
Kidd, former Knick.
Jason Kidd would be awesome to have as coach.
Oh, Carmelo.
That would be amazing if Carmelo becomes the coach. I'm gonna call you an ISO me.
Let's see. How about this? Stephon Marbury.
Oh.
That'd be great.
The king of China.
Yeah.
Eddie Curry. Okay, guys, we're gonna eat some food, and then we're gonna talk about practice while eating more food.
We're gonna bulk up. Oh, J.R. Smith.
That would be amazing.
Phil Jackson.
Wait. Yes. And you won. Ralph writes, who are we going to pick with the 8th pick? We've been discussing that. Ralph writes, are you excited about the prospect of having Priggs back as an assistant coach? Sure. Andrew writes, how high could we trade up with a package of the 8th pick and Hernan Gomez? You don't think very high. Andrew writes, I saw an article saying that an option is to trade the 8th pick and our first round pick next year protected for D'Angelo Russell. Thoughts? That seems like a lot for D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah,
But would you? I'm going to say, would you trade the 8th pick of this year's draft for D'Angelo Russell?
Yeah, I think I would, but not 2 picks in a row.
2 picks in a row seems kind of insane to me. But it's like D'Angelo Russell for the 8th pick that would spark my interest.
Yeah, I mean D'Angelo and the 8th pick, D'Angelo and the Lakers 2019 pick might be interesting.
Yeah, I almost feel like you need. I feel like you need more assets from the Lakers to make this work.
Yeah, I don't.
I would do that.
I'm not sure there's a trade there.
Yeah. Kenny writes, Are we in any position financially to have a crack at Gordon Hayward or Paul George? Sign and trade with the Clippers in a 3-team move involving Melo somehow. That's not happening. There's just no way.
Stop.
Gillum writes, Bill Simmons wrote his rules. This rules to fix the NBA lottery. And this is pretty interesting. One, no team could win the lottery twice in a 5-year span. That would rule out Minnesota, Philly tonight. It would also have saved us from Cleveland in 2013 and 14. No team can win the lottery if it has made 5 straight times. That would eliminate Sacramento, Phoenix, Philly, Orlando, and Minnesota. No team could land a top 3 pick for 3 straight years. That would push out Philly and the Lakers. He added, we shouldn't allow franchises to dwell in the lottery like NBA squatters, right? The Mavericks have succeeded for the entire 21st century. It's a shame they have to fend for ping pong balls with the same dumbasses who frequent the lottery like they're scratch-off buyers at 7-Eleven. Thoughts?
I mean, the Mavs picked Dirk at 11.
Yes, but the whole point basically is that shouldn't you somehow be penalized if you're in the lottery every year?
Yeah, I think you should be penalized by being fired.
Yeah, well, you're not firing the owners, and the owners keep hiring these bad GMs that Orlando has had so many high picks and they're horrible. They're not at least Philly can say they have a process going. Orlando's just got who the hell knows what Orlando's got going.
I mean, it's sort of like our banking system a little bit. I agree, Freddie May is too big to fail. You can't have just Chase and Bank of America going under. Everyone loses their entire life savings. But if you're too big to fail, then you're only going to be so good because you're fail safe, right? I mean, if the Sacramento Kings were able to really do all the crazy shit that they wanted to do, they would be a one-win team, but then no one would go and they would fall under and it would hurt the whole NBA. So it's whatever.
Well, here's 2 questions. First of all, going back to how to fix the NBA and make it more competitive, what if we eliminate get rid of the cap? So the Knicks can go insane, and Dolan can say, "Okay, we're gonna spend $200 million this year. I'm gonna." The one thing Dolan has always been good about is spending money, and he just says, "I'm gonna spend $200 million. I'm gonna try to build a team that way." Would that be good for the NBA?
No.
You don't think watching Dolan spend $200 million would be good for at least for something?
No, it would be good if he bankrupted himself, I guess.
Yeah. That would be some way to go in the opposite of having a straight instead of having a. It is a frustrating system right now. Your system of having the 1, 2, 3 was being floated. I don't see that actually passing.
Oh yeah, the concept that you have to fix the NBA is a little bit misguided because I think the NBA is great. It could be better, but it's good.
I think the draft lottery should be fixed. Well, it's already fixed, but I mean, having the whole system where it encourages teams to tank, there should be some way to fix this because they can either make it more entertaining or just eliminate the need to tank. If you just gave everyone the exact same number of ping pong balls, 1 through 14, you have the exact same shot at getting the number 1 pick. That would almost be better.
As a general concept, I like the idea of actually so the Nuggets and the Heat, right? Were so close to making the playoffs but they barely missed out. There are some aspects where I like the Heat and the Nuggets getting the first and second picks,
right,
and having it the other way around. But then what's the point of doing anything if you're the Kings right now? There's no point.
And then my other idea, which I floated in the show, I don't know if you've heard us mention, but I think it's the NBA should be they should be at my groveling to thank me for this idea. It's such a good idea, in my mind. Is having a bottom 8 tournament for the top pick. Take the bottom 8 teams, NCAA style tournament, and how amazing would it be seeing the Knicks play Philly to see who could draft Fultz? You don't think that would be a ratings extravaganza to see your teams play for the top pick? And you want to be bad, but you also don't want to be that bad that you can't win the games to actually get the pick.
I mean, it's fun. It's a fun idea. I don't think it would actually fix things.
I don't think it would fix things. It would just be super fun to watch.
Yeah,
but also
be fun.
You also you could tank, but you can't tank that bad that your team's not that good.
Yeah.
I don't. It would be highly entertaining. Would you not want to watch that game?
No. I mean,
Really?
like, yeah,
I would be.
yeah, I
think
would.
it'd be awesome to watch.
Yeah,
that.
it
Maybe
would be
it would be. I guess it would be the NIT tournament, but like I think it would be an awesome. Well, the Knicks would be in it every year, so I'd be watching it. At least the Knicks would be in some kind of tournament, some kind of postseason thing. Gilliam writes, as good as there's a good chance the Knicks select Ntilikina, why not go and sign more European players in free agency? I want to propose two who might make the jump this summer. Miles Teodosic has been one of the best players in Europe for years, about 25 to 30, 3-year probably. Edwin Jackson, another point guard French, who has been the best scorer in the Spanish ACB, and I think 12 seasons, will be quite cheaper than Teodosic, probably similar salary to Kuz. So I guess the moral of this is, why should the Knicks be scouting the European leagues to try to sign guys from there to get better than trying to sign NBA free agents?
Well, you only have so much upside if you're doing that, but I like the concept as a way of like filling out your roster from, spots 8 through 12. But, if your 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th best players are better than the other teams, it doesn't really matter if your 1 through 7 aren't good.
Right. You probably hope to get a guy who somehow could be also so good in the NBA that he could be like at least like a top player off your bench.
Yeah,
which is probably not that easy to do.
Well, and it couldn't be the best player on your bench on a good team. I mean, like Hernan Gomez, like isn't bad. I just don't think he's all that valuable.
I guess it comes down, is there anything the Knicks can do that people aren't thinking of to suddenly become contenders? The other idea I had was we can find some ex-CIA agents and have them infiltrate the Spurs and just find out everything they do and bring it back to us.
Well, if you could record Dolan saying some really racist stuff, then you could get him.
I don't know. In a post-Trump world, I think that might just be like he might get to keep his job.
he might be
Gilliam
made the
writes,
commissioner.
Yes, Gilliam writes, which again would work out well because then he could be, maybe that somehow he would leave the Knicks if he becomes the commissioner.
Yeah.
Gilliam writes, do you think there's a chance that Melo could be traded to Miami? When Bosch's contract comes off their books, they'll have space. Could we get the draft number 14 or maybe Justice Winslow for him?
Yes.
So
I love it. Yeah, that's what I want to happen.
Yeah, I'm totally down for that.
Tyler Johnson and Justice Winslow for Melo.
I do that.
Yeah, well, of course the Knicks do that.
Paul writes, speaking of the draft, Phil said everyone wants a great big players right now. Does he mean players like KP, Giannis, and Cousins? Players who are special because of how they move and how they space the floor? Things Phil doesn't value at all.
Wait, say that again?
Speaking of the draft, Phil said everyone wants a great big player right now. Does he mean players like KP, Giannis, and Cousins? And he said players who are special because of how they move and how they space the floor. And then he points out that Phil doesn't seem to really value big guys who move well and space the floor.
I think he was just like, hey, I picked Kristaps.
I think that's, yes. I think
everyone wants Kristaps.
Oh, I'm so good. Look how good a job I'm doing. It's been 3 years, and the only thing I've done is get a KP. Paul writes, everyone who will listen, and it's also, I know KP is really good and has a lot of potential, but let's not pretend that he drafted Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing came in the league, and obviously a different era, but he made such a difference to the Knicks team that KP is not making yet, and he was such another level of player. KP is not there yet. As far as
he's not there yet, but like I think Kristaps is amazing.
No, I think he's going to be a very, very good player. But it's not the same thing as him drafting Patrick Ewing yet. It might get there, but it's not the same thing yet.
Sure.
Yeah, whatever. Paul writes, everyone who will listen knows that I think Fox is the best player in the draft. Are you guys high on anybody? Who do you think the best player in the draft is?
I think it's Fultz.
Okay, outside of Fultz, I guess you already gave us your list. So your number 2 was Ball, right?
Who do I guess if the question means who do you have way higher than most people?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
OG Anunoby, I have 7th.
Okay, there you go.
So let's see. NBA Draft.net, which you shouldn't go to because it's, I really don't like the idea of picking based on consensus. I think that like that's how you make mistakes, like Julia Okafor. So NBA Draft.net is very consensus, and they have, let's see, where's Anunoby? They have him going 40th to New Orleans.
Wow. Okay, here's the reverse question. Who do you think of the top 10 picks is the most, or the consensus top 10 picks, who do you think is the most overrated?
Jaren Fox is pretty overrated.
You're going to say Tatum also?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that Dennis Smith isn't overrated, but I think that people are missing the boat that he can't just end up in the same situation that he was in this year, because he just he just put up empty numbers in a bad situation, and if he just ends up in a dysfunctional organization like the Knicks, he's just gonna like put up shots and be worthless. So I think that he could be really good, and in that regard, people aren't overrating him. But I think that people are looking at him and being like, this could be Russell Westbrook, and like that's not the type of motivation that he has. He's not going to be good no matter what.
Paul writes, did you guys see this tweet? And this is from a Dick Vitale tweet, and he says, Lonzo Ball's shoes are $495. If he plays in the NBA like he did versus De'Aaron Fox, they'll go for $4.95.
Yeah, I mean, clearly Dick Vitale doesn't know anything about college basketball or basketball, so it's not like one-on-one. It's not like Jaren Fox versus Lonzo. It's 5-on-5, and the big reason why Jaren Fox went off is because they kept dropping their bigs, like playing like this really dumb way of playing defense against like the exact opposite way you want to cover Jaren Fox. So it honestly was more like Jaren Fox versus like the big man for UCLA. It was really it was honestly like Jaren Fox versus the coach at UCLA.
And last question of the show. Paul writes, how patronizing is it to have Clyde as our draft lottery representative? How much is it part of Dolan's attempt to compensate for what he did to Oakley? I mean, how much do you care who the representative is?
I don't really care.
Yeah, it's hard to really care, and I think it's fine. It should be a Knicks legend or Nick Great being the representative, because that's just do something.
I mean,
that, like,
in a basketball sense, like it just doesn't matter at all. Like it's, I mean, the whole Charles Oakley thing, the whole like trying to compensate for it by having Latrell Sprewell at the next game, like the whole honoring old New York greats in responses, like as a PR attempt. It's just like drawing attention to the fact that like James Dolan is like a petty human who's like has a negative emotional effect on people around him, and basically he was projecting when he wrote that letter saying like, you're an alcoholic, you suck, you probably make everyone upset. Honestly, like James Dolan is making the entire city of New York upset and is toxic, and like, you know, that's why the whole thing happened with Charles Oakley. Like that's it's like an emotional, psychological, like, you know, oh, James Dolan's a bad human. It doesn't really matter in a basketball sense.
So you're saying, just to be clear, you don't think the Knicks have the best owner in basketball?
God.
What did we learn today? Did we learn anything today? We learned something interesting. You had a lot of good insight for the draft, and that was very helpful for the Knicks, because the draft is all we have now. I
think we learned the triangle.
Yes, we learned that the triangle has 3 sides to it. There are many types of triangles, and none of them will work out in New York, so it doesn't really matter. They'll be gone in 2 years, so who gives a crap?
We learned geometry. This is like Sesame Street, you know? What did we learn today? Triangle.
The word of the day is triangle.
The letters L. For taking an L.
There's been a theory that if the Knicks if Phil just called it something else, then there wouldn't be all this like stink around the triangle. I don't know how much I really buy that either.
Yeah,
like,
well, God. If the triangle was working, there wouldn't be stink around it.
I don't even know. Like, if everyone bought into the triangle, I'm sure it would work to some level. And the Knicks aren't going to win a title next year either way. And maybe if everyone buys the triangle, it'll work out and we'll get the number 1 pick in the draft.
God, whatever. I mean, like, triangles are only going to take you so far. Like, okay. You know what? We saw what happens when you have like the best system in the NBA against like talent. It's basically the Celtics get blown off the court.
Right.
LeBron James, like it's like ultimately, you have to have good players, and you get good players by making good decisions. And
if you said the Cavaliers are now going to run the triangle, they probably win the title with the triangle. And you'd say, well, that proves the triangle. It just proves if you have really good players, they can make a lot of things work.
You know, the Warriors run. If I had to say, you know, if I had to rank teams in terms of their degree of using triangle philosophies, I would say that they're like a top 5 team in terms of implementing like triangle strategy. Like the Spurs,
more modern triangle. It's more of a modern approach to the triangle, though.
Well, right, and I mean, like they, like when they had Andrew Bogut, like he would sort of create from the high post. Like that's a classic triangle thing. Like the whole idea of having like Klay Thompson in one corner and then Iguodala in the other corner, like that's like a triangle thing to do. Having Draymond Green like sort of creating, and then Steph Curry off ball, like he's basically a hyper level of Derek Fisher, basically, unless he has the ball in his hands, of course, in which case he's a lot better. So like the Warriors do a lot of triangle stuff. You just can't like, well, God, I mean, you just can't like run only the triangle. That's just not how it works. That's not bad. No.
Right. It's basically you can run principles of it, but you have to have a more modern system.
Like the Spurs basically run the triangle.
I mean, with the Lakers and the Bulls, I don't remember it well enough watching them. Were they running this pure triangle?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. I all I remember watching was that like Lakers were really good, the Bulls were really good, but I didn't remember thinking like they're running triangle. That's why they're really good.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's because that wasn't like the case. It's just, well, you know, actually, you know, I was thinking back to the whole Shaq Kobe triangle. The second iteration, especially when Lamar Odom was playing, like Lamar Odom was basically like Draymond Green in that, you know, but like most of the time when it was Powell and Andrew Bynum, like, yeah, they mostly, for the most part, would run triangle stuff. Like Kobe would just dribble and fuck around, and then maybe they'd post Powell up, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the Knicks are far from having the right roster for all this. That's one of the part. Like, and just bringing in guys like Derrick Rose never made sense if you really wanted the triangle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Nothing makes sense. Whatever. The Knicks will be. All we know is the Knicks will draft someone. We're going to hope he's going to be good, and everything else will be a disaster.
Yes.
Okay, we can play the goodbye music, which you'll put in later in the show or in
No, that's goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye,
goodbye, my love.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. It's all over. Goodbye. It's time to go. This is the end. Say goodbye.